Now I have a term that's going to help you guys, and it's called inside versus outside. And this is a rule that you'll stick this in your head. For the bass, this is going to be a little bit different, because remember that some stay shallow, a little warmer. But my general rule is, if this is my break right here, and this is my 25 to 35 feet, and this is that percentage triangle, this is the tip of it right here. This back in here would be the spawning flat, grass, whatever it may be, okay? Cross-sectional cut. If it is 60 degrees and below, I go inside this break. If it is 60 degrees and above, I go outside this break. Now for the bass, I may say 68 to 70. I may stay in here a little bit longer. But then I come out to here. Okay? That's a general rule that's going to keep you fishing in the right location. Always keep that in mind. Now, what I would do is say if we went down and we were going to go night walleye fishing and the water temperature was still 65 degrees. I took you guys down there and you're all excited to catch your biggest fish. I pull up, and if you start casting to that transitional break or whatever it may be, and you're catching walleye this big, and you're catching smallmouth that big, just quit. Because they're not here yet. It's too warm in there. Their main food source, which they want to eat, which is the rainbow trout, moves into these areas when that water temperature gets below 60. 55 to 50 is being the best. Reason why that trout's moving in, because that trout in Roosevelt wants to eat those snails, which are contained along that shoreline. He comes in for the snails because the water's cool now, because they don't want to be up in here when it's 70. A trout can't take that. So they're moving in. Then what's happening? Remember, just like the whitefish? Well, the trout is now the whitefish for the walleye. He's following that rainbow trout in. So what would happen here if we went out walleye fishing, and I would tell you guys, look, guys, see this break right here? These fish usually lay right in here, and we cast the shoreline, and we pick them up off the shoreline, but the water temperature is 65 degrees. We know they want to go to here, correct? They're not going to be too far away from home here. So in turn, if you look down above on this and say this was the shallow section and this is the break right here, this line right here represents this, and then this represents the shoreline. Okay, that's crude, but this is the break. What we would do is we'd start trolling here, like this. And what I'm doing is each pass I make, I'm moving further and further out. Because at some point in time out here, I'm going to intercept them. I'm either going to see them on my graph, or I'm going to hit a fish out here. As soon as I hit that fish, I've got a GPS which draws a nice line for me. Once I've hit that fish, I can mark it, spin around, and then I'll continue to troll that line right there. Because that's obviously where they're living at. Small fish don't live with the big ones, guys. If you go out with me and we're crappie fishing and we're catching crappies this big, I just pull up ship and leave. The big ones will be with the big ones. The small ones will be with the small ones. I don't care if it's a bass, perch, crappie, walleye, or pike. Okay? So inside versus outside. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? What time do we got here? Make sure we... Okay. A few more minutes and we'll have questions here. Now guys, I'm going to say this one more time too, and I know that some of you have been to my seminars, and I'm going to say it over and over again. If your buddy goes out and he catches a big fish, every one of you here wants to know, what did you catch it on? You always want to know, what did you catch it on? Just ask the question of, how deep were you? How fast were you moving? How close were you to a break? Were you fishing deep weeds? Ask those kind of questions. Okay? I've got piles of tackle. Everything will catch fish. The key is to find them first. If you can't locate them, guess what? You're never going to catch them. All right? So always ask that question. Guys go into these tackle shops. What are they biting on? Everything you're looking at. Okay? You can throw out a super duper and catch a big bass on it. Is a super duper a bass bait? No, it's a trolling bait for trout. I've seen it done. Okay? They'll eat a variety of things, but if you're not on top of them, you're not going to catch those bigger fish. So just always ask the good questions. Ask water temperatures, ask speed, ask depths. Okay? All right, guys, we got about 15 minutes left, so now what I like to do for the last 15 is questions. So we make sure everybody gets covered what they want. So fire me off some questions, guys. Yes, sir.
As these walleyes become greater and greater in Roosevelt, are the trout going to become less and less?
You know what you'll find is the trout won't necessarily become less and less. The trout will get bigger. And through becoming bigger, they will be less. And what I mean by that is you can have something that happens, and guys will use what happens up in Canada a lot. I've fished up in Canada, and I've fished up near the Arctic Circle. And you can go up there, and my dad and I one day were jigging walleyes, and we caught 120 walleyes by noon and quit counting. You can have too much. What happens if you start to see, I'm catching a lot of trout, and I'm catching a lot of 12, 14 inchers, that means the walleye aren't doing so good. Okay? What you want to do is go out trout fishing and catch some good trout, 16 to 24 inches or whatever it may be. That's going to tell you that the system is healthy. It's finding a balance. All right? The reason why the trout in Roosevelt, and it's not to the fault of the walleyes, the reason why the trout in Roosevelt have had a hard time lately is one, the budgeting and not getting enough fish in the net pens released. The second thing that's happened is all the high water, they pull the plug on coulee. There's been fish caught, rainbows, caught in Portland that came from our hatcheries up here. Okay? I personally caught one in the Hanford Reach, bass fishing, that came from up here. Well, they're getting blown down there when all that water gets rushed out. That's the biggest thing. Last year they released more out of the net pens than they had in several years to try to boost that up. All right? Now I've got a Roosevelt trout thing coming up tomorrow, which we were talking about. And there's different methods of catching those fish in there. All right? Everybody wants to go out and troll. A rainbow trout, just to get on a sidebar, a rainbow trout is just as an aggressive fish as anything out there. And rarely will you see me down at Roosevelt trolling for trout. You'll see me up against the bank throwing crankbaits. You'll see me swimming curl-tail grubs. You'll see me drop shot fishing. Because that's where the biggest fish are at. Okay? You can go down there and troll all day long, pull up on a bank, and within a few hours you've got your limit of big fish. And there's a reason for that, which we will cover tomorrow night. But that's the walleye won't be wiping those trout out of there. Trust me on that. Okay? More questions, guys. I know I wasn't that good.
What do you do when you're in a shallow area and you're surrounded with pike and you're throwing, say, spinner baits, but they're not taking it? Okay,
what's happening there? So you like that? You like it when you're like, I know what you mean. You look out there and you see them all there and they won't eat. Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Okay, here's what's happening, guys. You can pull into some of these places. You see it at Coeur d'Alene Lake. You see it at Pend Oreille River. Any place you got pike. When we fished up at Lesser Slave Lake, which is 1,000 miles north of here, I saw it there. The pike get underneath, and you see it a lot of times in spring, and you'll look out in 2-3 feet of water, and you'll just see them laying there like cordwood. Well, what they're doing, and a pike by nature, guys, is a lazy fish. They're lazy. You know, a 4-footer can hit bursts of 28 miles an hour. They can hit a cruising speed of 8 to 10 miles an hour. That's smoking along. But what they're doing is they're simply sitting there basking in the sun, just taking in the rays. When you see fish sitting like that, the best bait you can use is a suspending jerk bait. If it's weedy conditions, you're going to have to use a soft plastic jerk bait. What you have to do, toss it up in front of him if there's one laying here, crank it down and stop it right in his face. Crank it right to him and stop it right in his face. And once it gets to his face, just shake your line so that thing's not barely moving. And you leave it long enough there and they're going to get cranky and they're going to eat it. When you're buzzing a spinnerbait by them, they just won't touch it when they're sitting like that. You have to get something right in their face, and that's the thing with pike, and that's something that we're working on hard, is because there's not a true method of finesse fishing pike. The drop shot technique, I'm trying to find a way to make it work. I can catch them on it, but they get broke off quite a bit. Okay? Suspending jerkbait. The Washington State record, which was caught by Brian McManus at 34 pounds and 6 ounces, I believe. He was bass fishing at 9 Mile Resort. Saw that fish laying there, took a pointer 78, threw it out, cranked it down, stopped it right in front of its face, and then just twitched it. We do it Coeur d'Alene in the springtime. You'll see them laying up in the mud. Cast past, reel down, let it sit. And it's just a waiting game. I'm more patient than you are. And they just get cranky. Something bright colored, orange, whatever. Just let it sit there and then just twitch it a little bit. They're either going to turn off or they're going to explode on it. But you can't just power right past them when they're sitting. They just will not. Their whole principle is just to take in the sun. So try the suspending baits like that. It'll work for you. Promise. Other questions, guys? Yes, sir.
I read in the Friday report in the paper that they're starting to get some walleye up in the Snake River near Central Ferry.
Oh, yeah.
Is that going to be a
That's
good fishery?
That's going to be a good fishery. Actually, at the mouth of the Walla, they've actually got fish that are showing up in there and spawning. And the guides have kept it quiet, but they've gotten fish that 16, 17 pounds down there. And what's happening is they're not seeing them go up the ladders. They're not ladder climbers like a steelhead or a salmon. They're coming through the locks. You'll see walleye all the way in Lewiston eventually. You'll see them up in there. And that is a concern on the biologist part of what are we going to do because of our smolts and everything else. And they're just coming up through the lock system. But yes, that will be a fishery. That section is no different than going out here to Roosevelt. I mean, it's the same. There's the same type of structure, same current flows. They'll be in there, and they'll root in.
Spring, you're fishing off the flats like you should?
I'm fishing off the flats or off points. You know where Outhouse Flats is at, guys? You know where that's at? If you come out of Fort Spokane, go down past the point where the dump's in at, you hang a right and go up and you'll see a marker can up there. And it's up there 5 or 6 miles, 4 miles, whatever. And where you see that marker can, you look up there and there's an outhouse there. That's what they call Outhouse Flats. And Outhouse Flats looks something like this if I was to draw it. You got the marker can, and then you got the outhouse sitting over here like this. Well, there's a contour in here that does something like this, and if you look at a Roosevelt map, you'll see this. And what this can is marking, the can would be over here. There's like a big rock or something in here. But what you've got is you've got a contour line like this. Okay? Like this. This kind of comes in like this. Well, what do we have here, right? The further the lines are, the shallower the slope. All right? Well, this, when I talk percentage triangle, this is my tip of my triangle right here. What you're focusing your efforts on is this area right here. They can move up shallow to get the sun, but they want to be off in the depths. Now, I don't know if I've showed this to you guys. I know some of you have seen it, but I'm going to bore you with it one more time. Okay, so you understand how the fish works. Okay, if a walleye is sitting here, or a pike or a bass, and it's cold outside, they don't have a ton of energy, right? Metabolic rate is slow. They got to conserve as much energy as they can. If they can go up a break that's very steep this direction, or they can go up it this direction here, what's easier for them to do? Which one? Straight up. Okay? Straight up is the easiest thing for them to do because all they have to do is inflate their swim bladder simply through breathing, inflate the swim bladder, and they lift up. No energy lost. Okay? To do this on a big, long, sloping flat, they got to swim the whole way, right? Which is using energy, precious energy when it's cold. That's why you always focus your efforts off of these deep breaks, and you don't go a long ways back in there. They're going to move up, inflate, come up, feed around in here for perch, sculpin, whatever it may be, come up, get their sun, and then they just traverse back down, and they're not traveling a great distance. You know, people say flat fishing. You hear things like a spot on a spot. Well, a spot on a spot could be a flat with a rock pile on it or a depression in it. The percentage triangle, you're on the flat. You've managed to find the flat. Now what you got to do is find that spot on that flat or the spot on the spot where they want to be, which is your highest percentage to catch the fish. 90% of the fish live in 10% of the water, correct? That triangle theory is that 10%. That's how you find that 10%. When you look out there, just don't be awestruck like, holy, 150 miles long, here we go. People just go out and flail away. You've got to put yourself in a position first. Putting yourself in that position is studying your graph, studying your maps if you have one, finding those percentage triangles. Those fish are always going to live somewhere around there. Okay? The walleye's migrating. All right? So he's going to be moving from Outhouse to the point to, you know, the island to McCoy, just like we talked about. So you're going to follow them up, and you're going to turn around and follow them back down after the spawn to find the big fish. Guys, they've done studies on pike. They say some pike don't move more than 400 yards all year long. Well, you find that percentage triangle, right? It's got the depth. It's got the spawning in the back end of it. What are they doing? They're living in the cool times and the deep stuff, push up shallow to reproduce, slide right back off. Fishing with me is boring because all you're going to do is look at the same scenery all day long. It's the honest truth. I don't move. I'm not a guy that goes here, there, and everywhere. Okay? I don't care if my boat does 60 or 20. If it gets me to where this spot is at, all I care about is my electric motor or my trolling motor to just traverse that spot because I know they're there. Right? That's the biggest key, is to get on those big fish. Fish in the cool water times. Put yourself at the percentage triangle where the water is deeper, where they come up the slope to feed. Okay? Put yourself in that position. They'll eat a variety of things. Okay?